Tonight I'm going to cover paleo versus keto. It's something I've been asked about a lot in the past, so I thought it's about time that I covered it. Well, let's get started then. So I'm going to start by looking at keto. As I say, I've been asked by a number of people, so I'm going to try and keep it simple, but give you some information on the pros and the cons for both of them. And then I'm going to give my own personal experience and own personal opinion. So the basis of keto is that it's very low carb, that it is high in fat, it includes dairy, which paleo doesn't, and it's aiming to achieve a state of ketosis, which is basically when your body is in a state where it burns fat for energy rather than burning glucose for energy. And over time, your body gets more efficient at doing this, i.e. burning fat for energy, and turning fat into ketones, which is a byproduct of fat burning. And so that's the principle of it, but you have to make sure that you get your ratios of the foods that you're eating right in order to achieve that ketosis. So it's quite a regimented diet, and in my opinion, it is a diet. And I personally am not a fan of diets because I think that they are short term. And therefore, any health benefit or any weight gain that you get as a result of that is also short term. It's also temporary. But nonetheless, lots of people do have lots of success with losing weight. So if that's your main goal, then keto is definitely something to look at and to consider and maybe even try. So very low carb, very high in fat, includes dairy, and aims to achieve a state of ketosis so that you are burning fat instead of glucose in order to have energy in your body. So there are some side effects, as often comes with diets, because we're cutting out a lot of foods, which means that we can have some withdrawal symptoms. So particularly in the first week, there's something known as keto flu. So you might start to feel a little bit crappy. Things like sugar withdrawal are quite significant in the body. So some of the side effects that you might notice with a keto diet, particularly in the first weeks, are headaches, fatigue, brain fog, irritability, constipation, trouble sleeping, nausea, stomachache, dizziness, sugar cravings, cramps, sore muscles, and bad breath. It almost makes you wonder, why on earth would I give this a go if I'm going to feel so crappy? But those side effects are generally temporary. But there are some issues with keto diet, which is what I want to highlight this evening. And you have to be quite careful with it. So this is why you need to make sure that you don't have too many ketones. And I'm going to endeavour to explain why. So what are the dangers of a keto diet? Well, one of them is that it can lead to dehydration and a chemical imbalance of your blood. And it basically becomes too acidic. And if this continues, it's called ketoacidosis. If this is on a prolonged basis, then it can actually be quite dangerous in terms of a coma or death. So you have to be really careful. It can be difficult and dangerous for those with uncontrolled diabetes. So ketosis is a sign of too much glucose and not enough insulin. And we need insulin for our body to be able to use the glucose as energy in our bodies. And to actually get it into the cell so that we can actually use it in our body. So if the blood becomes too acidic, it can then damage the liver, kidneys, and brain. So I know I'm not painting a very good picture here, and I'm trying to be unbiased because obviously I'm in the paleo camp. I am trying to be unbiased. I did a lot of research around the dangers of paleo and of the keto diet to make it balanced. So dehydration, blood imbalance, acidosis, very bad for those with uncontrolled diabetes. Ketoacidosis can be an issue for people that don't have diabetes as well, and it can be particularly prevalent for those with alcohol issues, those that don't eat properly, so starvation, and those with an overactive thyroid. Signs to look out for if you're in the kind of danger camp, if it's a problem for you, are thirstiness or a dry mouth, going to the toilet a lot, as in peeing, feeling very tired, dry or kind of flushed skin, feeling sick, throwing up, trouble breathing, confusion, fruity smelling breath. Now, this is interesting because my friend gets very bad sickness during her pregnancies, and she has been in hospital with every pregnancy with issues with her ketones, and that fruity taste on your breath, fruity smelling breath, is a big sign of it. So that's actually a real one. And finally, pain in your belly. So if you're trying a keto diet and you're getting any of those symptoms, then I would encourage you to put that on hold and at the very least go and see a doctor and explain what's going on for you. So is the keto diet something that we can do on a long-term basis? I mean, the word diet for me is a bit of an indication there that actually it's not something that we can do on a long-term basis. And again, I've done lots of research on this, and lots of experts say that because it's so restrictive, it's not an appropriate diet to follow on a long-term basis. Now, you've heard me mention Dr. Axe many times. He's an American doctor that takes a natural approach based on his mother getting quite poorly, actually. And he's my go-to person. Like, I really respect his opinion. And he says that it's best done for 30 to 90 days, then followed by a more sustainable diet. But it's not intended to be a long-term way of life, hence the fact that it's a keto diet. Temporary. The issue is that because it is a diet and it's a temporary thing, that lots of people go on to regain the weight that they lose as soon as they go back to eating carbohydrates, because keto is very, very low on carbs. And the problem with that is that the weight that they gain back tends to be more fat as opposed to muscle, and it's muscle that burns the energy and keeps us slim, basically. So that yo-yo dieting, whether it's keto or any other kind of diet, when you lose the weight and you regain it, it tends to be fat rather than muscle. I think for me as well that there's a tendency for the people that have like a problem with portion control and binge eating, they're more inclined to do something like the keto diet. They're attracted to it because of the weight loss. And actually, because the diet is so restrictive, it can have a negative effect, you know, an even worse effect on our relationship with food, because ultimately that's what this comes down to, the relationship with food, how we view it, how we see it, how we use it. And if that's an issue for you, or that anybody reaching out for a keto diet, then really you do need somebody like me, like a lifestyle coach, that's going to help you work on your relationship with food, and so that you've got a more sustainable and more healthy relationship with food going forward. What else have we got here? Yeah, that yo-yo dieting can have a long-lasting effect on your metabolic rate. Now, your metabolic rate, your resting metabolic rate, is the amount of energy that your body burns when you're at complete rest, you're not doing anything. So that kind of going off and on a diet, in particular the keto diet, can have an impact that's life-lasting on your metabolic rate. So I think my warning really is that if you want to try the keto diet, I would encourage you to do that under the supervision of a doctor or a nutritionist or somebody that can support you in that, because there are some significant dangers with ketoacidosis and can be potentially life-threatening. So it's something not to do on a whim. It's something that needs to be thought about, that needs to be done properly, and ideally with somebody supporting you that knows what they're doing. So paleo then, what's this all about? Now, I'm just for being transparent, I follow the paleo lifestyle. So I've tried to give a balanced view of keto versus paleo, but ultimately after all my research and looking for kind of opposing opinions, I'm still very much in the paleo camp. So it's often referred to as the ancestral diet, and it's basically in line with what our ancestors ate. So the foods that are removed from the paleo diet are the foods that were added into our ancestry much later in history, and therefore the idea is that our bodies aren't designed to digest them, and that's why we get a stomachache, we don't feel very good, and we get inflammation. So there's a big emphasis on whole foods. It's very much plant-based, but it's also quite heavy in meat, which is where the kind of opposition or people that don't like paleo will object to it. So whole foods, ideally organic vegetables and fruits, and very heavy on fruits and vegetables, grass-fed and naturally raised, so organic meats, wild-caught fish, eggs, nuts and seeds. That's the basis of the paleo diet. You also avoid all processed foods. So I typically have a rule, which is if something's got 5 ingredients in it that aren't fruits and vegetables, I would consider that very highly processed, and I would do my best to avoid that. I'm aiming, if I'm going to eat anything that's kind of towards the processed way, for a maximum of 2 ingredients. But ideally, I just want to eat fruit, veg, fish, and meat. It's that simple. You're also avoiding, as I say, processed foods and sugar, and there are no grains, there are no dairy, no beans, no legumes, and that includes peanuts. So one of the big differences between keto and paleo is that keto includes dairy and paleo doesn't. Just checking my notes here. Okay, so the other similarity, so there's a difference in that paleo doesn't have dairy and keto does, but they both are very low carb and they're both high in fat. So there are some definite similarities there. Like with the keto diet, when you first start it, you get some food withdrawals, and that can create what is called like a keto flu, but you can also get withdrawal symptoms when cutting out foods on the paleo diet. So they might look like low blood sugars, low carb flu, cravings, lack of energy to start with, bad breath, and a change in your bowel habits. Okay, so I've mentioned the side effects that you can get from keto and from paleo. In both cases, they're generally temporary. You've just got to ride it out, just like with the Whole30, it's that initial withdrawal. So to give a balanced view, what are the dangers of paleo? And again, it comes down to that low intake of carbohydrates. And the fact that paleo removes all cereals and all grains. So some people would think this is an issue because they're really good sources of fiber, B vitamins, iron, magnesium, and selenium. I would say that actually you can get those elsewhere. So iron and magnesium in leafy green vegetables, for example. Selenium you can get in some nuts, and fiber you can get in other foods as well. So there are other alternatives, but you need to make a conscious effort to eat foods that are going to replace those that you've cut out. It's not something that we do kind of willy-nilly. We don't think about it. We need to think about the foods that are on our plate and what they are providing us in terms of vitamins, nutrients, and minerals. So the other negatives to paleo is that there is no dairy products, and therefore you could become deficient in calcium and vitamin D. But again, I'd counter that you can get calcium from leafy green vegetables, and vitamin D, our main source, is actually the sunshine. Both keto and paleo have an emphasis on high fats, but it's about which fats you're eating. So things like coconut, olive, flaxseed, walnut, and avocado are good fats, and they're monounsaturated, so they're not saturated fats. But again, we need to just kind of approach these things with caution. And I think with any way of life or way of eating, we need to listen to how our bodies are responding. How do I feel? Does my energy go up or down after eating a certain food? And just documenting is like, does I get pain? Do I get aching? Do I get sneezing? Do I get run down? How do I feel after eating food? And then tinker any recommended diet or lifestyle to suit your individual body, because we are all different, and what works for me might not work for you, but there are definitely some core principles that will work for everybody. The other drawback that people would highlight in the paleo diet is the high intake of red meat and high fat meat. Now, I do my best to only eat organic, and it is expensive, and so therefore actually I probably eat less than a lot of people that are doing the paleo diet. But because it's organic, I will eat the fat on it, and I believe that that's good for me because of the collagen. Helps to reconnect my intestine tissue, i.e. healing the leaky gut and bringing that mesh back together. I think with anything, there's always going to be good and bad, and you're always going to find research that either confirms or disproves what somebody else says. And again, that comes back down to listening to what works for your body. How do I feel when I eat this way? How do I feel after a certain food? Does this give me stomachache? Does it give me a headache? Does it make me feel sleepy? Does it make my energy feel low? How do you feel? Like, just connect with that. I'm always suggesting that people keep a food diary for about 3 days, because it's not too labor intensive. It's a reasonable amount of time to do it, but it really gives you an insight as to how you feel. Because the symptoms that we get from eating foods that our body don't like creep in over time. You don't wake up, today I feel fine, and the next day I wake up and I've got all of these symptoms. Actually, they creep in one at a time over days, weeks, months, years even. And because they creep in slowly and subtly, they become our new normal, and we accept them as just the way that we are. But keeping a food diary really helps you to highlight how you feel on a daily basis. So the thing is, when people don't think about how they're going to play out any diet or health regime that they're going to embark on, you can make some really bad mistakes. So I remember going to a seminar and I sat next to this lady, and she was a big lady, and she told me that she was on the keto diet. So I'd offered her a cherry fruit, natural fruit, grows on this earth, not man-made, totally natural to this earth. And I offered her a cherry and she said, no, thank you, I'm on the keto diet, I can't eat it. And then I looked over half an hour later and she was drinking a Diet Coke. Now that's a really, really poor way to follow the keto diet, because you're basically saying no to good, wholesome, real food, but instead drinking cans of aspartame and man-made sugars, which, by the way, create more fat, because those sweeteners our body cannot use as energy. And so what happens is they stay in our gut and our liver turns it to fat, visceral fat. You know, that stuff that makes you look bloated. It's not that pinchable stuff. It's the fat around your organs, which is actually really dangerous. And when you've got that visceral fat in your stomach, it basically creates the environment for your body to create more visceral fat, because it turns off your I'm full hormone and it will make you feel hungry all the time, which means that you eat more of those sugars. That's why we avoid processed foods, because they're full of all these sweeteners and they just make us crave more and more sugars. So for me, I sit very much in the paleo camp, because for me, it's a lifestyle. It's not a diet. It's not something that's short term. It's not temporary. It's a lifestyle. It's a way of life for me. I like that there's a list of foods that are to be eaten all the time, foods to be avoided all the time, and some foods in the middle which are to be eaten in moderation. That makes it very easy for me. I can remember that list. I know exactly what I can eat and what I can't eat, and I apply some logic to it. So I make sure that 50% of my plate is green, 25% of it is good quality protein, and 25% of it is carbohydrates, but not in the form of grains, in things like sweet potato, parsnips, carrots, swede, celeriac, so root vegetables. That's where I get my carbohydrates from. So it is a low carb diet, but there are some carbs in there. For me, the keto diet is so restrictive. You've got to be really on top of your ratios in order to achieve ketosis, that I think it really feeds into any kind of perfectionism, any kind of obsessive food habits. And for me, that's something that's really important for me to step away from. As I've been on my healing journey, you know, food has been a huge, huge part of that. And I definitely went through a phase of being obsessive about it, because I was so desperate to get well. I would have done anything that I could have done. And I became very obsessive about my food. And it just takes up so much space in your mind, and that obsessing about it. And if you accidentally or deliberately eat something that you're not meant to eat, then creates that kind of guilt, and guilt leads to self-sabotage and binging. So it's just a negative cycle. So I like the relaxed nature of paleo. Foods to eat, foods to avoid, foods to eat in moderation. It's as simple as that. I don't have to be very rigid about what's on my plate. I don't need to aim for a certain state of ketosis. So it's restrictive, keto. It feeds into perfectionism and food obsession, and it's very difficult to do on a long-term basis, and therefore your weight loss and health benefits that come with being keto tend to be as short-lived as the diet itself is. What else? In conclusion, I don't like diets. I like lifestyles, a way of life. I don't like anything that feeds into obsession, into perfectionism. And I think it's really important that we are supported in this, and that we actually address the underlying relationship with food, because that's what it comes down to. Food is often used by people as a way to numb emotions, to pick us up, to make us feel better, to comfort us. And we need to think about, well, what is my motivation behind food? So for me now, wasn't always, but now my motivation for any food that I eat is, what nutritional value does that give me? What is that going to help my body with? How is that going to make me feel? What vitamins and minerals is that going to give me? That's how I look at my plate. I don't want to eat anything that is going to detract from my health and has no nutritional value in it. So a lot of people drink Diet Coke. It's very common across my clients. They're very addicted to it, but there's no nutritional value in that whatsoever. There's nothing good in it. And I don't want to eat anything that is not beneficial to me. Everything I eat has a purpose. So it's important to understand, what is your relationship with food? How do you use food? Do you binge on it? Do you starve yourself? Do you go for sugars? What is that all about? What's your driver for wanting to do the keto diet or the paleo diet? Is it because you want health? Because when you've got health, a healthy weight comes with that. I lost 3 stone through changing my eating habits, but I wasn't going into that to lose weight. That was a positive side effect of aiming for health. So this, for me, should always be our ultimate driver for any diet or health regime that we embark on, is health. And when you've got health, when you've got balance in your body, the weight will balance itself anyway. That will come. Do you have limiting beliefs around food and around your weight? So I talk about this often. I'm a lifestyle coach, so that incorporates food, but also mindset, because I don't think you can have a healthy body without a healthy mind. And so if you have a limiting belief, or a belief about yourself, whether you realize it's limiting or not, that you are overweight, that you can't stick to a healthy regime, that you can't lose weight, or that you're lazy, you might make some changes. You might start the keto diet, you might start going to the gym, you might start the paleo diet, but ultimately you will fall off the wagon because your mind would rather be right than be happy, and it will want to prove to yourself the belief that you have that you're overweight. So for me, the key to long-lasting weight gain is to work on your mind, is to understand your relationship with food and to understand what your beliefs are. And if you can identify those beliefs, you can then say, well, do you know what? That doesn't serve me. That leads me to bad habits. Maybe I can change my beliefs. So in a nutshell, whether you want to do keto or paleo or anything else, I think it's important to avoid processed foods. So check how many ingredients there are. Have a look, and if you don't know what they are, for me, I don't put them in my body. If I don't know what it is, I'm not eating it. At the very least, I'm going to Google it and find out what it is. I don't want to eat anything that is man-made. I want to eat foods that grow naturally on this earth. Nothing that's been put in a factory or highly processed or tampered with or chemically produced. I'm just not interested in it because my body does not know how to process that. It doesn't know how to digest it. So I am not touching it. I'm very firm on that. It's also important to keep sugar to a minimum, which you'll get in both the paleo and the keto diet. And as I said earlier, we want to focus on eating foods that are going to fulfill nutritional purposes. So vitamins, minerals, and nutrients. What is this food going to give me? And I think it's really important to eat regularly. So we need to balance our blood sugars. This is very key to having good health, is balancing our blood sugars. So eating regularly, whether that's every 3 hours, every 3.5 hours, it could be a small snack, but balancing your blood sugars is really key. And for me, I just want to keep it as simple as possible, because if it's difficult, if it's complicated, if it's time consuming, I'm not going to stick to it. And so for me, that's why I take a paleo approach. So meat, fish, veg, fruit. As simple as that. Every single meal that I eat has got green veg on it. I think I have this motto of eat green with every meal. 50% of my plate is green veg, 25% meat or fish, 25% good quality carbohydrates. It's as simple as that. So that is all I've got to say this evening, really. There are pros and cons to everything, and I think ultimately what it comes down to is understanding what works for you, because you are individual, your body is different, your demands on your body are different, so what works for you. A food diary is a really good way to capture what does and doesn't work for you, but ultimately get rid of processed foods, get rid of sugars. And for me, although keto includes dairy, I think it's a very inflammatory food. It's very mucus producing. A lot of people with asthma, if you cut out dairy, actually you'd find that your symptoms have gone away. I took I took inhalers from the age of 15. And I've not used one in 5 years. I don't even have one. I don't need it anymore. So food, think about it. Understand what it is, what it's giving your body, how it's going to nourish you. And if you can't see how it's going to nourish you, don't eat it. Get rid of it. But I'm still, despite all my research, very much firmly in the paleo camp, because I think it's a way of life. It's less restrictive and it's just easier to stick with on an ongoing basis. As always, if there are any particular subjects you would like me to cover, let me know. I'm always looking for ideas on what it is you want to hear about. Thank you for watching. watching my video. If you enjoyed that, why not subscribe to my channel, and don't forget to hit the notification button. That way you'll be alerted anytime I post a new video, and you won't miss my top tips on how to live a happy, healthy, stress-free life.